Hi everyone, my name is Kaylee Stoneham and I am a graduate student at Morningside College studying teacher education. I'm a certified pre-K to 12th grade visual arts teacher, and the title of my study is Effects of Studio Habits of Mind on 4th grade student engagement. This study looked deeply at one fundamental predictor of school success, being student engagement. Despite the focus in educational research, importance of engaging at-risk students to obtain academic achievement is essential to families, educators, and researchers alike. Students who are disengaged face an increased chance of dropping out of school, which can lead to a number of serious consequences, including a higher likelihood of future incarceration, dependence on social services. Only about 83% of public high school students graduate on time, meaning about 1 in 5 students do not graduate on time, if at all. Research has shown that at-risk students who are of minority groups, economical disadvantages, and those with disabilities are often at a greater risk and need to maintain motivation and focus for school. I chose to do this study because I work in a considerably low-performing district with a reputation for very high suspension rates, and I felt the need to focus on at-risk students. There is only about 82.7% graduation rate within my school, and though there are many variables that have a substantial impact on levels of student engagement, I chose to focus on teacher instruction so that I personally could have a positive impact on my at-risk students. I chose to focus specifically on student-centered instruction because of 21st century skill requirements such as critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication. Over the years, researchers' attempts to increase student engagement led to a general understanding that the arts can be a highly engaging and powerful strategy leading to students' overall success. However, there is still debate on what student engagement fully entails and what practices in particular of the arts positively affect student engagement. In 2016, Baker implemented a qualitative research study to investigate teachers' perceptions of student engagement as an effective arts-integrated instruction. Baker used phenomenology to interpret teacher interviews, and results revealed that all but one teacher observed an increase in engagement utilizing art integration practices. Lindemann's 2018 study explored risks and benefits of choice-based art and discipline-based arts education in terms of student interest and engagement. A student agreement survey was designed by the researcher and used to see how claims of student engagement, ownership, and practice of artistic behaviors in a choice-based environment compared to that of a discipline-based environment. Results showed that student engagement and enthusiasm about art, as well as ownership of their artwork, proved higher in a choice-based setting. Success of both studies, with a focus on art interventions, particularly art practices that emphasize student choice and agency, align with the constructivist theory. Constructivists recognize children as capable creators of meaning and knowledge, and constructivist pedagogies deem children directors of their individual learning process. By giving children these hands-on and active roles in their learning, providing opportunities to share with their peers, they are capable of learning through experiences. To summarize, both studies were qualitative and explored art-based interventions for student engagement, but neither utilized a valid or reliable measure or provided quantitative results. Both studies only analyzed behavioral and observable aspects of student engagement, presenting a gap in the research regarding the cognitive factors of engagement. The purpose of this study was to determine whether or not at-risk 4th grade students' engagement scores improve as a result of studio thinking curriculum and the studio habits of mind. For the purpose of this study, student engagement encompasses all aspects of cognitive, affective, and behavioral engagement. It was hypothesized that students who receive choice-based and student-centered instruction by way of the studio thinking framework would report higher levels of student engagement than students who receive discipline-based arts education. This study addresses the gaps in the research by providing quantitative data, utilizing valid and reliable assessments, and specifying art-based instructional practice. Results of this study could impact the value education places on importance of student engagement and how specific instructional methods impact student engagement. More specifically, the study could impact educators' perceptions regarding their role as lead teacher versus role of facilitator and how it might impact engagement of their at-risk students. The study will help inform me on which framework I use to accommodate disengaged students in the future. This study used a non-equivalent control group quasi-experimental design. In a quasi-experimental design, the independent variable is manipulated, but the participants are not randomly assigned to conditions. This design was chosen because the enrichment class schedule made it possible to randomly assign participants. The experiment was conducted with 30 fourth grade at-risk students. Participants were selected based on their at-risk status according to 3 characteristics: response to intervention services, individualized education plans, and limited English proficiency status. Class groups, not individuals, were randomly assigned to the control or experimental group, and all were 9 or 10 years old during the study. The experimental group consisted of 15 students, 8 male, 7 female. 9 of these students had an IEP, 1 was labeled LEP, and 7 received RTI services. There were 12 African Americans, 2 Hispanic, and 1 white participant in this group. The control group consisted of 15 students, 6 male and 9 female. 3 of the students had IEPs, 10 received RTI services, and 1 student qualified with an LEP status. There were 11 African American, 2 Hispanic, 2 white participants in the control group. No incentives were given to any students during the study. The researcher administered the Classroom Engagement Inventory, known as the CEI, as a pre- and post-test measure of student engagement to both the control and experimental groups. The CEI is a student survey developed by Weinbergen and Bergen to measure behavioral, affective, and cognitive indicators of student engagement with individual classroom settings. The engagement items on the CEI are on a 5-point scale of frequency ranging from 1 to 5. Items on the scale are coded so that students with lower scores indicate higher levels of student engagement, and those with higher scores indicate lower levels of student engagement. The CEI confirmatory factor analyses and convergent, concurrent, and predictive validity studies were conducted by authors revealing evidence of sufficient strength of the instrument. The CEI's reliability coefficient with McDonald's omega of each of the 5 engagement factors range from 0.82 to 0.90, deeming the CEI a valid and reliable assessment tool for student engagement. To analyze the results of the CEI, participant points were added and the sum was divided by the total number of questions asked. Therefore, the highest possible score was a 5, while the lowest was a 1. The control and experimental groups were both taught by the researcher, hence there was no teacher effect confounding the results. The experimental group was instructed by way of Studio Thinking Framework and Hetland's 8 Studio Habits of Mind. Participants were guided through a total of 8 lessons, focusing on 1 studio habit introduced by 1 video from ArtCore per lesson. Following each lesson, participants shared in a reflection practice using the Prescott Studio Habits assessment, which provided sentence starters on the studio habit content. After the 8 lessons, participants were given 4 studio days where they worked as artists utilizing studio habits and ended each class with a reflective practice using the Glow and Grow conversation by the Art of Education. The control group was instructed by way of this discipline-based arts education method, and this method was taught using 3 units from Prince George's County Schools' 4th grade art curriculum. For each unit, famous artworks were observed as a way to discover techniques prior to art making. Units lasted 4 art days, and at the end of each unit, participants were given a critique handout created by Oklahoma State University. The art critique handout was used as a guide for students to process and think critically, and was comprised of 4 parts including describing, analyzing, interpreting, and judging. 12 weeks following the implementation of the study, both experimental and control groups completed the post-CEI survey. While looking at Table 1, we see the independent samples t-test comparing the CEI pretest scores of both control and experimental group, indicating that there was not a statistically significant difference between the 2 group scores. The experimental group scored just slightly higher than the control group. The t-test comparing the post-test results showed that the experimental group had statistically significantly higher levels of student engagement than the control group, with a large effect size of 0.886. Figure 1 shows that the experimental group's mean score on the CEI post-test was 27.28% lower than that of the control group, indicating higher levels of student engagement than the control group. Overall, results of the independent samples t-test indicated that the studio thinking curriculum was effective at increasing participant engagement. The hypothesis that students who received studio thinking curriculum and studio habits of mind would show lower CEI scores, indicating higher student engagement, was supported. The purpose of this study was to determine whether or not at-risk fourth grade students' engagement scores improve as a result of studio thinking curriculum and studio habits of mind. Lindemann's 2018 study was similar in that it also explored the effects of choice-based art practices compared to discipline-based art practices and hypothesized that choice-based instruction would result in higher student engagement. Both studies' hypotheses were confirmed, indicating that choice-based and student-centered instruction positively affects student engagement. Lindemann's results, however, were based on a singular collection of survey data revealing percentages of student engagement, while my study measured an increase or decrease in student engagement over time. Baker's results revealed significant increase in levels of student engagement while learning through arts integrated practices. Both Baker's study and my study utilized a Likert scale to rate student engagement factors. Baker's engagement scale was completed through teacher observation, while my study had students rate their own engagement through a self-assessment survey, the CEI. Both studies revealed an increase in levels of student engagement following art interventions. Baker's results revealed increased levels of behavioral engagement, while mine revealed an increase in both behavioral and cognitive engagement. Though data collection methods differed, both studies indicated that art education is an effective intervention for student engagement. The statistically significant difference in student engagement levels in all three studies can be connected to ideas behind the constructivist learning theory. Hetland shared that the success among students using student-centered practice supports Vygotsky's constructivist theory, which implies students construct knowledge and meaning from their personal experience. Thompson explains that Dewey's social learning theory presents a need for students to be involved in as many hands-on and active social activities. The success of the groups using both art-based and student-centered activities in these studies could be contributed to the quantity and consistency of their collaborative and social opportunities. Among the participants of the experimental group, the results show that at the most basic level an increase in engagement. The teacher of the experimental group used an entirely new mode of instruction which placed participants in the position that required increased engagement in order to succeed. The increased engagement of these students could stem from the desire for learning experiences that are new and exciting, and this would imply that instructional variety can help to attain interest of students, naturally resulting in increased levels of engagement. Looking beyond statistical results, participants expressed a genuine excitement for creating something new in a way that allowed them the freedom to use personal experience and interest as a means to guide the creative process. This implies that students seek autonomy in their learning experiences. The experimental group showed greater engagement levels while instructed by a teacher who embodied the role of facilitator. The increased levels of engagement for participants of this group indicate that inclusive curriculum can benefit all students, including those considered at risk, and results indicate that educators should consider providing students with increased responsibility over their learning to increase levels of engagement. Impact of the findings show that teachers should provide instructional variety to increase student engagement, provide students with increased responsibility, providing opportunities to collaborate and communicate, increasing 21st century skills. Administrators should consider professional development on student-centered instructional strategies to increase student engagement. Students showed an interest in authentic art making, and it did show that they increased confidence, decreasing stigmas for disabilities. And results should encourage parents to push their students to explore personal interests.